My name is Rachel Miller, and I never thought I would tell this story publicly, but the weight of it has been with me for years. It is a story about family, about love, about secrets, and about how one hidden truth nearly tore everything apart. Looking back now, I realize that secrets have a way of growing in the dark, feeding on silence, and eventually demanding to be revealed. My brother, Ethan, carried such a secret, and when it finally came to light, our family was shaken to its core. Ethan and I grew up in a small town in Ohio. Our parents, John and Linda Miller, were the kind of people who valued hard work and reputation. Dad owned a small hardware store that he inherited from his father, and Mom worked part-time at the library. Ethan was 2 years older than me, and from the outside, our family seemed ordinary. We went to church on Sundays, had cookouts in the backyard during the summer, and spent Christmas mornings unwrapping gifts in matching pajamas. But under the surface, not everything was as perfect as it seemed. Ethan was always different from me. Where I was outgoing, social, and eager to please, he was quiet, introspective, and sometimes withdrawn. He had a small group of close friends, but he never opened up much to anyone. I remember countless times sitting on the porch steps with him, trying to draw him into conversation, only for him to shrug and change the subject. At the time, I thought it was just his personality, but now I know he was carrying something much heavier than I could imagine. The first sign that something was wrong came when Ethan was in his final year of high school. He started staying out late, sometimes not coming home until the middle of the night. Dad would pace the living room, furious and worried, while Mom would sit silently with her hands clenched together. I would hear their whispered arguments long after I went to bed. When Ethan finally stumbled through the door, smelling of smoke or something unfamiliar, Dad would confront him, and their shouting would echo through the house. Ethan never explained where he had been, and after a while, Mom stopped asking. She just looked at him with sad eyes, as if she knew more than she let on. By the time Ethan left for college, the tension had only grown worse. He chose a school far away, in Chicago, and he rarely came home. When he did, it was like he was a guest in his own house. We would sit around the dinner table, trying to make conversation, but there was always a barrier between him and the rest of us. I missed the brother who used to play catch with me in the backyard, the one who taught me how to ride a bike and scared away the bullies at school. That Ethan felt like a memory. The breaking point came years later, after Ethan graduated. I was 22, finishing my last semester of college, when Mom called me one afternoon with a voice so shaky I dropped everything and drove home immediately. Ethan was back in town, and he had something to tell us. When I walked into the living room, I saw him sitting on the couch, his hands clasped tightly together, his face pale. Mom sat beside him, her eyes red from crying. Dad stood with his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. I felt a knot form in my stomach. "Rachel," Ethan said quietly, "there's something I need to tell you, something I should have told all of you a long time ago." The room was so silent I could hear the clock ticking on the wall. My heart pounded as I sat down. Ethan took a deep breath and began to explain. He told us that during his college years, he had fallen into a lifestyle that he had kept hidden from everyone. At first, it was just experimenting. Late-night parties, drinking too much, surrounding himself with people who didn't care where life was taking them. But it didn't stop there. He admitted he had developed an addiction, something that had consumed him for years. He described how he had lied to us, how he had stolen money at times just to keep going, and how the shame of it all had kept him distant from us. He said he had been to rehab twice but had relapsed both times. He said he was tired of lying, tired of pretending everything was okay. Mom broke down in tears, clutching his hand. Dad's face turned red, and for a moment, I thought he was going to explode with anger. But instead, he just walked out of the room, slamming the door behind him. I sat there, frozen, trying to process everything. My brother, the person I looked up to, the one I believed had it all together, had been hiding a battle that none of us knew about. The weeks that followed were some of the hardest of our lives. The secret was out, but that didn't mean things got better right away. Dad felt betrayed, not only by Ethan but also by Mom, who admitted she had suspected for a long time but hadn't said anything because she didn't want to break the family apart. That revelation created a wedge between my parents, and for the first time in my life, I saw them sleeping in separate rooms. I felt caught in the middle, trying to be the peacemaker, trying to hold us all together while dealing with my own feelings of anger and confusion. Ethan, for his part, was trying. He started attending support meetings in town, and I went with him a few times. Sitting in those rooms, listening to strangers share their struggles, I realized how much pain my brother had been carrying. It wasn't just about bad choices, it was about loneliness, about trying to fill an emptiness he couldn't explain. He told me one night, as we sat in the car after a meeting, that he had always felt like he didn't belong in our family, like he could never live up to Dad's expectations. I didn't know what to say. I just hugged him and told him I wasn't going anywhere. But healing is never simple. Dad didn't speak to Ethan for months, except in clipped sentences. Mom tried to bridge the gap, but she was exhausted. At family gatherings, the tension was unbearable. I remember Thanksgiving that year vividly. The turkey sat untouched for almost an hour while Dad and Ethan argued in the kitchen, their voices rising until Mom burst into tears. I sat at the table, staring at my plate, wondering if we would ever feel like a family again. It wasn't until a year later that things began to shift. Ethan stayed sober for the longest stretch he ever had, and he started working at a local community center, helping others who were struggling with addiction. Slowly, Dad began to soften. He would ask Ethan questions about his work, small at first, then more genuine. One evening, I came home to find them in the backyard, fixing the old fence together. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Looking back now, I see that Ethan's secret nearly destroyed us because we weren't prepared to face the truth. We wanted to believe in the picture of a perfect family, but perfection was never real. What was real was the love we had for each other, even when it was buried under anger and disappointment. Today, Ethan is still in recovery. He has good days and bad days, but he no longer hides from us. Dad and Mom have rebuilt their relationship, though it took time and a lot of forgiveness. As for me, I've learned that family isn't about pretending everything is okay. It's about standing by each other even when everything is falling apart.